official podcast of the Jacksonville Public Library.
I'm Hurley.
And I'm Jenna.
It's a beautiful Monday morning here in Jacksonville, Florida. What are you up to, Jenna?
What up? Nothing, just, got done talking to our awesome symphony friend, Kate. Mm-hmm. She is a French horn player with a symphony. But first, what you reading?
You checked it out with your library card. Tell us what you're reading.
All right, in this segment, Hurley and I usually tell you what we're reading, but we're going to tell you what you're reading today.
That's right, folks. We asked, you answered. We have an online form going on our podcast page, jackspubliclibrary.org/podcast. It'll pop up there, and we'll ask you what you're reading, and you can answer. And these kind folks answered our desires.
First up, we've got one from CAF Constance, and they're reading a local author.
Interesting.
Look at this. All right, so the book they're reading is the Allie Brown Criminal Profiler series by local author A. Ryder. That's R-Y-D-E-R.
What do they have to say about this book?
They just say it's an interesting fictional read from a local author.
Sounds great.
Snaps for them.
Sign me up.
Hopefully that book's in our collection. Look it up, guys. A. Ryder, R-Y-D-E-R, Allie Brown Criminal Profiler. All right, next one we have one from A. Perry. They are reading Beartown by Frederick Backman.
Ooh, this sounds spooky.
Yeah, they say only halfway through at this point, but it was definitely hard to get caught up in this book at first.
Uh-oh.
It seems to have taken a turn now, however.
Ooh,
all right,
great.
So one of those slow starters. But
taking a turn to Beartown.
Ooh. Shake it up. Okay, they also say they're also reading Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens.
Yes.
This is a bestseller, y'all.
I've heard so many good things about this book.
Yeah, they say, I love this book. The writing is so wonderfully descriptive and the characters were well created. I highly recommend this book.
That sounds like everything a good book needs to be a good book.
Yeah.
No wonder it's a bestseller.
Love it. All right, so that's Beartown by Frederick Backman and Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. Next up, we have one from Allie. It's called I Gave Up Men for Lent by Casey Main.
What a great title.
This is amazing. It says, inspiring and relatable, must read. She's reading it as an ebook. Man, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I Gave Up Men for Lent by Casey Main. I'm gonna look that one up. That seems awesome. Thank you for that awesome recommendation, Allie.
What's up next?
We have one last one, and Hurley, you might recommend this one as well, and you actually have on here.
Have I?
Becoming by Michelle Obama.
Oh, yes.
Someone
My
is
girl Michelle.
Our friend Dee Clayton is listening to this book on audiobook, and they say very informative. Highly recommend.
Oh, it's more than just informative, sir or madam, whoever is listening to this on audiobook. It is emotional. Yeah. It is an incredible book. Everybody has to read this book.
It's a journey. All right, so those are our recommendations, guys. Go on our podcast page, jackspubliclibrary.org/podcast, and tell us what you're reading. If you didn't like it, we want to know.
Do it.
If you loved it, we want to know.
Tell us.
Tell us what you think. Boom, boom. All right, Hurley, who are we talking to today?
We are talking to horn player Kate Caliendo from the Jacksonville Symphony.
Woohoo! Yep, she's a professional horn player.
I know. Who gets to say that?
I don't know.
Only like 3 people in town.
That would be
probably
sweet, in a bar talking to someone. What do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a professional musician.
Yeah, I play the horn.
I play the horn.
No biggie. But she also dabbles in the accordion and the flute. So she's multi-talented.
Yeah.
We had a great time talking with Kate, and she's going to tell us all about her career as a horn player, as well as her thoughts on the future of classical music. So here she is, folks, Kate Caliendo. Kate, thank you so much for joining us today on Completely Booked.
Thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. So how long have you been playing music?
Well, I've been playing music basically my whole life. We always had a piano growing up, and music was huge in our household. So ever since I can remember, I was plunking out tunes on the piano by ear. I started taking piano lessons in the 2nd grade and started playing French horn in the 5th grade. So I've been playing horn for, I think it's a little over 20 years.
Wow, that's a
Man,
long time.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and we read online that your dad is also a musician himself, and he's a music teacher too, I think I saw.
He is retired band director now, but he's very musically talented. He used to play in a rock band, and then he became a band director. He plays piano, drums, flute, clarinet, basically everything.
Wow, he's a Renaissance man.
Yeah, so music was always very encouraged in our household.
Definitely. And how did that influence you as a professional musician?
Well, especially as a young aspiring professional musician, my dad was in that music community, so he knew all of the great opportunities for me, honors bands that I could audition for, or who would be best to have as a teacher, or how to go about getting private lessons. So there were always a lot of opportunities for me.
That's a wonderful resource to have on your side. So you said you started playing the horn in 5th grade?
I did.
Okay, what drew you toward the horn?
So this is a funny story. And actually, ever since I can remember, I wanted to play the flute. I thought it was beautiful. My dad had this beautiful flute with this beautiful blue case, and I just thought the flute was the greatest. Fast forward to about a month before we pick instruments for band in 5th grade, and our music teacher is explaining all the different instruments in the orchestra and what they are, and she gets to the brass section and she talks about the French horn, and she says, now this instrument is special because the horn player actually puts their hand inside the bell. And something about that clicked for me, and I said, I need to play that.
Interesting. Wow.
It's so funny. I wanted to play the flute as a kid as well. I don't know why. It just seemed like such a dainty, beautiful instrument. I don't know what it was about it. I mean, have no musical talent whatsoever, but the flute was always so interesting to me.
Oh yeah,
that's what I would have played.
Beautiful instrument. Did you play the recorder at all, Jenna?
No,
really?
I didn't. But
I
I can remember my sister doing it and practicing at home, hot cross buns and stuff, and all those random weird songs that they make you play.
I could play all 3 parts of Scarborough Fair. That was my claim to fame in elementary school.
I remember being super jealous because I didn't do that in elementary school for some reason. But I always stole my sister's and got in trouble for it because I wanted to play so bad.
Aw, it's a great instrument to learn on. But so when you started playing in the 5th grade, what were the biggest challenges of learning how to play the horn?
Well, carrying it in the case, because it was a very big, bulky, cumbersome case, and I was a little 5th grader. Actually, I remember my dad brought home a French horn for me to try out before we started, and I tried to make a noise on it, and I couldn't, and I was upset because I wanted to bring it into music class and show and tell and say oh, here's this French horn, it's so cool, but I couldn't make a sound on it. And so my dad, maybe it was reverse psychology, but he said, if you can't make a sound on it, you can't bring it into class. And I got so angry that I blew really hard and I made a sound.
That riled you up. That's
Yes.
good. That's what we need sometimes. So we heard that you've also picked up the accordion in your spare time. What other instruments do you play?
I actually recently started learning the flute.
Oh, yay!
Yeah, my dad gave me his old flute.
Oh, in the blue
for
case?
Christmas. Yes,
Oh,
so now
wow.
that's mine.
That's
Oh.
And I have a beginning flute book, and I bug Les at work for all my flute questions. He's our principal flute at the symphony. And everybody likes to say that the French horn is one of the hardest instruments, but I really didn't have a frame of reference. So I would just go along with it when they asked me that, and I said, oh yes, it is very hard. I'm very talented to play it. But learning the flute, it is so different. It's, you put down a fingering and the note comes out. And on a French horn, it's not the same way. I have, a limited combination of fingerings, and they have to get me over the entire range of the instrument. So you can put down one fingering, and if you're not in exactly the right place, you might not get the note that you want.
Right.
But it's not like that on the flute.
Gotcha. So if you didn't play the French horn in the symphony, do you think you would play the flute?
I think
would it be something else?
I think so. I think I would have gone for the flute.
What instrument would you steer clear of?
Well, I love the oboe, but I wouldn't want to have to make reeds all the time.
Okay. How do you make reeds?
You have to make them yourself?
Yeah.
You do, yeah.
What?
Professionals will make reeds. Oboe and bassoon usually do that. And I don't know how to make them, but I know it's very time consuming.
Really? Mm-hmm. Wow. I had no idea.
Interesting.
That's nuts.
I'm curious about the accordion too. How did you get into the accordion?
Well, that happened after I spent a summer in Paris. and had just heard all of the musicians, and there's one accordion player that would always sit out by Notre Dame, and it was just so romantic, and I loved the idea of being able to play it. Did not know how big and heavy the actual accordion is. It's pretty fun. I can play Jingle Bells, and that's about it.
Cool.
That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
You know? As long as you got Jingle Bells down, you're good. So I'm curious to know what, of course, as we will mention in our intro too, you are a musician with the Jacksonville Symphony, and you have been for a few years now, right?
Yeah, this is my 3rd season.
Okay, wonderful. That's so exciting. So what is the audition process like for the Jacksonville Symphony? Or just any symphony, I guess?
For symphonies in general, it's almost a lifestyle. It's intensive. We spend a lot of time practicing. We spend a lot of time preparing, the same way an athlete would before a big game or a competition. I mean, it's kind of like training for the Olympics. We start learning what are called excerpts, and they'll be short sections of big orchestral pieces that we might play in symphony orchestras, and they'll be really challenging passages, showing all sorts of different types of playing: lyrical, loud, soft, fast, slow, high, low, just lots of different things that you'll need to do. And we start learning these when we're in school, and that's what we really work on in conservatories and with our teachers. And then when we're ready, which it never feels like we're ready, but sometimes we just have to jump into it, we'll go take an audition. And the first step is just sending in your resume and getting accepted to the audition. So not everybody that sends in a resume will get an opportunity to audition.
Oh, wow. So how many people do they usually let audition?
It depends on how much time is available and how many people they're able to hear.
Okay.
But a good number. Most people can get invited. We were able to hear most people, thankfully. But so once you get invited to an audition, then they'll send out the list of required excerpts. And sometimes it's for a symphony, it'll be very specific passages, and other times for symphonies they'll just list the whole complete works. So you'll have to know 8 Beethoven symphonies and 2 Mahler symphonies and 3 Strauss tone poems and 2 Mozart symphonies and a Prokofiev piece or something.
Holy
so
cow.
there's a lot of excerpts that we spend time learning. But so then when you actually get to the audition, it's set up in rounds, kind of like American Idol. You have to get through certain rounds and hopefully make it to the finals, although nobody's texting in their vote for you. We're not allowed to have phones.
Maybe that'll be the
screen.
future of classical music. We'll text in a vote.
Yeah. And so you'll be at this audition, and there might be a group warm-up room, and then before you're going to go on stage to play, which this all happens behind a curtain. So nobody on the committee can see who's auditioning. Usually it's carpeted so that we can't tell if, the sound of a footstep walking out. So it keeps things blind. And you'll go to a little private warm-up room right before you play, and they'll tell you the excerpts that'll be on the first round, and it'll be maybe 5 or 6 excerpts with a solo, which takes not very long, maybe 5 minutes.
Wow.
So, you've been working on this for so long, you've spent money to fly out or drive out and pay for a hotel wherever you're auditioning, and then hopefully you make it through these 5 excerpts, and they'll say, thank you, and advance you to the next round.
Right.
So
Wow.
So it all happens in one day. So is that how it works? So you make it through the first round, then they're like, okay, at this time later today, or is it a different day?
Sometimes it depends on the audition. Usually, in the Jacksonville Symphony, usually they're 2-day auditions. So we'll have preliminaries on the first day, and then maybe semis and finals on the second day.
Wow.
But it just depends on, it's usually a span of 1 to 4 days.
That's intense. How many people are in the symphony? Do you know?
In the Jacksonville Symphony, we have, I should know this number off the top of my head. I believe we have somewhere in the vicinity of 60 to 70 full-time musicians, which all of our musicians are full-time, which is great.
Oh, that's incredible.
Crazy. That's awesome.
So do you have any pre-concert rituals?
I wish I could say it was something awesome like, oh, I go into a dressing room and meditate. But it's really mundane, and I just make sure to go to the bathroom before I play.
Very practical. Yes.
I mean, you don't want to wind up in a situation where you're playing an hour and a half long Mahler symphony, and this happened to me, and you get to the bottom of the first page and you think, oh boy.
Oh, long time to hold it.
What a nightmare. That'd be
Yikes.
awful. So what are some of the pieces of music that you never tire of playing?
There's so many great ones. I particularly love Tchaikovsky's Fourth Symphony, which actually I'm performing tonight out in Brunswick.
So exciting.
And that's the first piece that I ever played with a big orchestra. So my teacher had me buy a score. I would have been maybe sixth or seventh grade. And I bought the score, and we got it on CD. I had this orchestra of Tchaikovsky symphonies on CD. And I would listen to it every night before bed. I would go through with the score and follow along. And I just knew it so well that it was hard not to love it. And it's a great piece.
Wow. Yeah. Any others that you just love playing over and over again?
Yeah, Also Sprach, Zarathustra, basically any of the Strauss tone poems. Ein Heldenleben is great.
Yeah, I got to hear you guys play that last year, and it was, I don't think I've ever heard so much volume in that symphony hall. Like, it was one of the loudest pieces I think I've heard the symphony play.
Yeah.
It was just so like over the top. I loved it. Like, can you tell us about that piece to
Sure.
give Jenna an idea?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, there's a lot of extra musicians. It's a huge complement in the orchestra, so there's a lot more musicians on stage than normal. So
It
that
was packed
contributes-
up there.
Yeah, contributes to it being loud. And for brass players, especially, there's so many excerpts from that piece that we've been practicing, and we don't always get an opportunity to play it. So when we do, it's kind of like the floodgates are opened and we just get to go for it and just enjoy playing all these excerpts that we've worked so hard.
Didn't the composer write it about himself too? I think I heard Courtney Lewis say.
He did, yes. I think he was like 30 or 31, and he wrote this piece about himself called A Hero's Life.
Oh, wow.
So pompous. I love it.
That's
It's
awesome.
hilarious. There was one part during that piece where the trumpet stood up and then got off stage. It was the trumpets, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And they played from off stage, so it sounded distant.
Oh, wow.
It was kind of silly. Like, I loved it. Like, it was very, like, I don't know. It was a hero's life. Like, it really felt that way. And it was such a fun piece. I loved hearing it. Yeah.
That's the battlefield section.
Yes, right.
And I think you can hear the trumpets off in the distance starting the battle call.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
that's
loved
cool.
it. Yeah, it was so
Like
cool.
a full production.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I know that a lot of folks, especially younger people, sort of stray away from classical music because they think it's a little stuffy. What do you have to say to people who think that way?
I don't know if I should take the time to define stuffy, but I think of stuffy
Sure.
as like just kind of maybe being out of touch or not being in tune with things, or especially in tune with your emotions. And I'd have to say that classical musicians and composers are some of the most emotional and sensitive people that you will ever meet. So they're definitely not stuffy. And there's all these great stories about, we talked about, Shostakovich was a composer who was writing in Russia in the early 19th century. And the Russian government was very happy with him as long as he was writing music that they approved of. And there are stories about how the Russian government kidnapped him in the middle of the night and was going to execute him, and he was in front of the firing squad ready to be executed, and then the government said, oh, just kidding, but don't write music we don't like in the future.
Whoa.
And so he'd sleep by the door just being afraid that they were going to come for him.
Oh my God, that is gnarly.
Yeah, so
Wow.
if you hear Shostakovich's Fifth Symphony, it's this incredibly heroic, grand piece, and it ends with this amazingly triumphant, powerful, the whole orchestra is playing together. It's just an incredibly powerful moment. But then there's this like just ostinato, repetitive ding, 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 ding. And it's kind of like a forced happiness. And that's like the government beating you over the head, telling you to be happy, and you're trying to just live your life. And I mean, there's so many stories like that. There's, Tchaikovsky was a closeted homosexual, and all of his music has this kind of oppressive hand of fate conflict between, you know, who he wanted to be and who he was and who he had to be. And his music is just beautiful and melancholy. And I mean, there's so many levels of emotion that these composers are able to tap. And then we as musicians are the ones who are responsible for really embodying that and presenting it to the audience so that they have a chance to experience it.
Right. And so if you get to know the composers a little bit before you hear the music that you're about to experience, it kind of lends a narrative to the piece that maybe you didn't have if you just walked in on your own, right?
Absolutely.
Do you think that's a good like solution for younger people when they, because I feel like whenever I tell my friends like, oh, I'm going to the symphony this weekend, and they say like, what do you even do when you're there? Like, you just sit and listen to music? I'm like, yeah, it's like the same thing if you go to hear like, I don't know, Ariana Grande in concert. Like, it's the same thing. You're doing the same thing. But for some reason it seems like younger people are so resistant to that because it's not music that they know and love and that they hear on the radio all the time. So I tell them, like, just go and listen before you go so you can familiarize yourself and you can know a little bit of what to expect. But it's also fun to go in blind too.
Yeah, I remember the first musical concerts I went to was the Monmouth Symphony in New Jersey, which is, you know, a little community orchestra where I grew up. And my parents would take me to the concerts, and I didn't know anything about the music. And prior to learning the French horn, all classical music sounded the same to me.
Right.
I mean, I couldn't really pick out the difference between Mozart or Beethoven or Strauss. Like, it really all sounded the same to me. But I would go to the concerts, and I remember just kind of sitting there in the audience, and I would close my eyes and I would just kind of let visions come to my head and see what the music made me think of, or, you know, just what it might elicit within me.
Right.
And that was the fun part about it.
Definitely. I've even been known to bring a notebook to the symphony, and I'll just
wow.
write or draw like while it's going on, and it's so fun. Oh, that's like the
that's
best moment.
fantastic.
Yeah, it's so fun. So I want to know your answer to this. I think a lot about, well, I guess when you go to hear the Jacksonville Symphony play today, it feels very equal in terms of gender. Like a lot of genders are represented on the stage. But for centuries, classical music has been sidelined by women. Do you feel like the glass ceiling is starting to break?
I feel like, yes, there definitely could be considered to be a glass ceiling within classical music. And yes, that could also be seen as breaking. It's such an interesting dynamic. And when auditions started to be blind, which didn't happen until maybe midway through the 20th century.
Oh, interesting.
Once we started having blind auditions, more women started winning positions in orchestras.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And that's, you know, why we have the carpet down, is so that we can't tell if somebody's wearing heels. And just from me in my life, I've definitely had instances where it seemed like I could look at something as me hitting up against the glass ceiling. And what I've found, though, is that if I start to look at it that way, it just kind of keeps me in a place of victimization and anger. And then the idea of a glass ceiling almost becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so I try to just not take those things personally, and I try to just find the areas where things are flowing smoothly or where I have opportunities, and I go for those. And then maybe after a while I'll circle back around and see if things are easier. But it's hard because you want to be able to identify it to fix it, but you also don't want to be just looking for it and seeing it everywhere and then kind of trap yourself.
Of course. And really your job at the end of the day is to play beautiful music. So yeah, definitely. What do you think the future of classical music or symphonic music in general looks like?
Well, you know, a lot of people like to say, oh, the orchestra is dying and we're not going to have orchestras. And I totally disagree. I think we're always going to have orchestras. There's such a great canon of classical music, and there are so many people who love it, and there are so many young people who are studying it in school that obviously it's going to continue in some form. I think that what's evolving is with all the technology that we have, it's so easy for people to make their own productions. So it's a podcast or a YouTube channel, or, you can release a single on Spotify. I think that the future of classical music is going to be much more inclusive, and maybe the lines between classical and pop will be blurred. Maybe the lines between professional and amateur will be blurred, but it'll be much more collaborative overall.
That's really exciting.
Yeah, people think we won't be here, but guess what? We're here to stay. As the library, we get the same thing, that the library won't exist in 10 years or whatever.
Yeah, and that the libraries are relevant, but I think it's relevant now more than ever, like as we're dealing with these technological shifts and really adapting to them, and the symphony's doing the same thing. Can you give us any gossip about what's going on in the 2019-2020 season, or is it under wraps?
Gossip about the 2019-2020 season. I believe that we're making our symphony announcement about that season very soon.
Yay!
I do believe that, we've been doing the Harry Potter movies. I believe that's continuing.
Wonderful.
Nice. I went to that one last year. It was amazing.
Ooh, which movie was it?
I think it was the
first one.
Yeah, the first one.
At Daly's place.
Okay. Yes.
That was fun.
It was really cool. Yeah, my mom came. She loved it. It was really awesome.
That was fun. Everybody in the audience gets dressed up. It's so much fun. People are quoting along. It's great.
That's so cool. So the movie plays and then you play the score along with it? Okay.
We play the soundtrack with it.
Wow. That's so cool. I need to go this year. Awesome. That'll be fun.
We're doing Star Wars in a few weeks.
That's going to be amazing.
Yeah, that's going to be huge. Wow. Is that at Daly's place as well?
I believe this one's at Jacoby.
Okay,
It's
gotcha.
Symphony
Times
Hall.
Union. Okay, wonderful. So, Kate, we asked this at the end of all of our interviews. We want to know, when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I remember telling my mother at one point that on the weekdays I wanted to be a teacher, and on the nights I wanted to be a police officer, and then on the weekends I wanted to be a painter.
Well-rounded.
You're busy.
Wow, yeah. You wanted it all.
Yes.
That's amazing. Well, Kate, thank you so much for coming on our show and for giving our city so much beautiful music. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Man, that interview got me pumped up to experience some classical music. How about you, Jenna?
Oh, yeah. You got any concerts coming up you're going to?
I haven't decided yet. I think they're doing Mahler 5 pretty soon. They've got they always have some good concerts coming up.
They're always having a very extensive list. Like, she's a busy woman. They do a lot of concerts.
They sure do. And they travel, too.
Yeah, they do stuff with other people, other symphonies, right?
They sure
do them in other cities. Yeah, that's pretty intense schedule for them, I bet.
It's a hard life as a classical musician.
Yeah. And like she was talking about all those scores that she really loves and like buying scores. The library actually has scores. So
we sure do, y'all.
Little known fact that you can actually check out a score and practice. We also obviously have books that will teach you how to play instruments, but the scores I think are really cool.
They sure are. Jenna, if you were a musician, I mean, you kind of are. You're a lovely singer.
Thank you.
Lovely voice.
Thank you.
What would you play if you were in a symphony? What instrument?
If I was in a symphony, I don't know. Like I said, I really like the flute, but I think nowadays I need something with a little more punch.
Sure.
The flute's a little too muted for my style
I see.
now.
Yeah. No.
So I don't know. I'm really fascinated with the drums.
Okay.
I don't
like
know.
the timpani?
Sure.
The really, really big ones?
Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. So if there's any sort of percussion section,
Sure.
I'd want to be in on that.
Maybe like the triangle?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd probably be more my speed, to be honest.
I could see you. I mean, that's a big job.
No doubt.
Yeah, it is. I think I would play the cello. I've always loved the cello.
The cello would be real cool.
It's beautiful by itself. It's beautiful when accompanied with other instruments. That's totally what I would play. But it looks crazy hard. And you have to like put it between your legs, which is weird.
Yeah, I read this book by Leanne Moriarty. I forget, the lady that wrote Big Little Lies.
Big Little Lies, that's
yes.
the one.
It was one of her other books. I can't remember, but the main character is a cellist.
Ooh.
And it's like so intense, like her doing all the stuff she does to get ready for an audition. And it's just like months and months of preparation. She like goes to different people's houses and lets them like listen to her It just seems so crazy. So when she was describing it, that's what I was thinking of, like the audition process. It seems
for
nuts.
sure. Really interesting industry.
Yeah.
So we also have beautiful music going on at our library downtown at the main library. Every month we have intermezzo concerts, which are local professional and semi-professional musicians who come in and play concerts here at the library, and they're totally free and open to the public.
Yeah, that's called Intermezzo at Main. So if you search that on our website, you'll find our upcoming concerts. We do them on Sundays at the main library in our Hicks Auditorium, and they're really cool. We get really good crowds for those too.
We sure do,
Yeah,
and it's a really amazing way to spend a Sunday afternoon downtown. It's a great time. Yes.
We also do a lot of symphony discounts. Sometimes we're good partners with the Jacksonville Symphony, and they will send us discount codes special for our library customers. So if you want to get some of those awesome discount codes for Jacksonville Symphony tickets, subscribe to our monthly newsletter. That is in the footer of our website. If you click subscribe in the bottom left corner, you can sign up for the monthly newsletter.
And this is a great opportunity if you're one of those who's a little symphony shy and you want to give it a try, but you don't want to sink, $80 orchestra seats into it. Just give it a shot. Like usually these tickets go on sale for $20 or less. So It's a really great way to try something new. Just get in the symphony hall and enjoy some beautiful music and see what you like.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the only way to do it.
Only way. While you're on our website, make sure you check out our podcast page, jackspubliclibrary.org/podcast. Like we said, fill out that survey and let us know what you're reading, and we will hopefully mention it here on our show.
Yeah, we'd love to hear it, folks. Get on social media as well. We are everywhere you can find us at Jack's Library, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And while you're listening to our show, please subscribe, rate, and review us.
Absolutely.
This podcast was produced by Brian Thomas, a.k.a. BT, a.k.a. Producer Brian. Goodbye.